As the output rolls across my screen, my jaw drops to the floor. Just dumped every private key they were using for the site, from their OpenAI, LangChain, and Speechify keys that they use to access their APIs, to their AWS access key for their servers, and to top it all off, their Stripe private key, which they use to manage financial transactions on the site. Welcome, one and all, to a very special episode, a very spooky episode, our very first war story of the channel. A story of a facade of professionalism betraying an empty shell masking unabashed frauds who sell vibe-coded slop to ignorant users. The results of this being so gruesome in fact that we have decided to anonymize the target so that we can freely share the extent of our findings without incurring any misguided legal retaliation. So it began, almost a year ago, when myself, Ton of Bricks, was searching for targets to play around with some techniques I'd been learning and to benchmark my skills as a hacker. Although I had found vulns in the wild at the time, I still had never really found anything critical without my teammates. I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't just riding the coattails of the many skilled hackers I was surrounded with after joining Electrica. So, just like that, I began scouting for targets. Speaking from experience, there are tons of red flags that can distinguish a regular semi-hardened website from one that will crumble with just a touch. Of course, there's a lot of obvious low-hanging fruit, such as websites with a single-digit user base, ones under construction, or those using easily identifiable software versions with known vulnerabilities. But obviously that kinda kills the point of testing my skills. Beyond that though, websites with traits like infinite attack surface, where they have thousands of unique pages and functionalities, are statistically impossible to secure. Little did I know at the time, but another trait that stands out is reliance on AI. AI-centric apps are usually expensive to operate and can rely on fragile API supply chains, as we covered in our last video, but that's not the most important factor. Instead, it's the baffling confidence that the people who design these websites put into AI. They treat these glorified text prediction models as brains in a box and believe they can get away with substituting that brain for their own. Or better yet, they boast about how productive they've been and shout from the hilltops that AI is making software development roles grow obsolescent. I had simply been learning about prompt injection and MCP servers and was curious about how these sites would hold up to basic inquisition. After all, new software is always fertile ground for bug hunting. And the last trait I was looking for was a site that had a free trial or demo requests, so I didn't have to find a bypass to do basic testing on their models. I combed through search engine results to look for some popular AI-centric websites, expecting to see a handful of low to medium impact vulns, and hopefully land one of the textbook vulns I had been studying. Several minutes of recon stretched itself into several hours. And just as expected, by the time I had gone through 2 or 3 websites, I had found nothing but low to no impact vulns like user enumeration, server-side request forgery, and email verification issues. And that's when I stumbled upon today's star. We'll just call this target Q. Q jumped out as having a few signs of being a low-effort website right from the very start. I grabbed a temporary email and as always attempted to use it as both the username and the password to create a testing account. Mostly this is just for convenience when logging in, but it also gives us more insight into how security conscious the devs are. Often, websites will prevent you from choosing a password that matches your username, or have a password policy that requires capital letters, multiple special characters, anything an email doesn't always have. Q, however, did not. So I log in, and over the course of a few minutes, begin to see a few more things that catch my eye. I have a UUID associated with my account, and in almost every request to generate some text or modify my account, this UUID is included. This stands out because if there were any way to leak or predict these UUIDs for other people's accounts, it could be an entry point for Insecure Direct Object Reference, or IDOR. An IDOR could allow me to essentially impersonate another user to see their data or make actions on their behalf without actually needing to steal their account. But this is just the initial phase of the engagement. I'm doing recon right now, so I don't dig any deeper just yet and continue finding possible entry points. In particular, my favorite way to find strange behaviors when attacking an API is to collect every dynamic input field I can find, like parameters sent in the query, body, and path. Using context clues like what the original values were and how the response body and timings changed based on the inputs, you can start to peel away the layers covering the soft exposed attack surface. I had collected a few of these parameters and began looking into their values when something else jumps out at me. One of these parameters is specifying a CSV file and shows its contents to the users requesting it. Among the many things that might be possible here, the first one to check for is local file discovery. We might be able to use path specifiers like this to trick the site into giving us any file on the entire machine, even sensitive ones like etc password or etc shadow. That's enough by itself for me to want to dive in, so I try to figure out how to recreate that request. Turns out it was the last in a chain of requests, which are initiated when you use the main feature of their website. This main feature in question takes some user prompt and uses AI to collect insight or plot data for analysis. What I didn't know at the time was I had just stumbled upon quite possibly the worst security fail in the history of cybersecurity. So I start the process of analyzing the request chain by hand in Burp Suite. I simply open the interceptor, start the request in my browser, and step through the request chain while sending each step to the repeater for later examination. Suddenly, I see something in the response to the first request that shocks me. I see Python code. Now, normally having an LLM generate Python code isn't anything particularly dangerous, but the content of the Python code is what made it so interesting. It was importing some libraries, then using them to write a new file to the output. Specifically, the file name matched the name of the CSV file I saw earlier at the end of the request chain, so it seemed that this Python code was actually being evaluated. Again, I forced myself to take a step back here. Even if the LLM is running code that it generates, there must be many layers of protection making it a trivial vuln. Things like strong filtering, a verbose and unique prompt scheme, and most importantly, a sandbox that the Python code is running in to keep malicious code from actually harming the device. Testing each of these hypotheses, I find that there don't seem to be any obvious filters on the input. I can tell the model to run malicious commands without being blocked, regardless of whether it actually runs them or not. If they had a well-structured system prompt, the model would be likely to tell me no when I ask it to do malicious things, and would require some context window poisoning to get around, but again, this didn't seem to be the case. The match that fell into the lake of kerosene in front of me was the last test. I prompted the model to run some OS commands, specifically ls, which would list all the files in the current working directory. Lo and behold, not only does it run, but it shows much more than you'd expect in a sandbox environment, including the config and source files for the application. Now, I'm not one to unskeptically accept that I found an exploit, especially because LLMs are known for their tendency to quote-unquote confidently lie, or in other words, predict outputs that aren't true. I've even seen people make fools of themselves before, claiming to the world that they had jailbroken LLMs and done just what I had, where the model was simply telling them what they wanted to hear. I tested a few times across different prompts, with different ways of printing the files, and I get the same file names every time, even if the response that the model gives isn't the exact same text. Clearly, whatever sandbox they're using is just implemented very poorly. They've leaked the source of their application, and that's it, right? I once again put this theory to the test, this time by trying to dump the environment variables. Python sandboxes will commonly have an environment variable that fingerprints exactly which brand of sandbox is running. As the output rolls across my screen, my jaw drops to the floor. Not only are we not in a sandbox, but the application just dumped every private key they were using for the site, from their OpenAI, LangChain, and Speechify keys that they use to access their APIs, to their AWS access key for their servers, and to top it all off, their Stripe private key, which they use to manage financial transactions on the site. The functionality of the Stripe API key, including but not limited to refunding all past transactions? Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that's crazy. You had full RCE on that server, and the LLM could write every exploit just by being asked to. That's a pretty insanely impactful and low complexity vuln that even my sweet old granny could exploit. But amongst all the red flags in that file screaming that it was game over, one little line shouted the loudest. For security laymen who made it this far, Root is the name for the administrator account on Linux machines. Not only was this just a poor use of sandboxing, not only was this remote code execution so easy to exploit, it needs a new term entirely to describe it, the application was running in a process started by root. So any code run from it would also be run with root permissions. Every ounce of control possible to take from that device was given to users who made a free account. At this point, there really was no higher impact I could achieve without beginning to move laterally on their network and trying to take over other servers they might have had. So to keep things ethical, I decided I wouldn't push it any further and I would immediately report what I had found. Although, I was still very curious how low the bar for security really was on the website. So I just decided to dump the source code and give it a look for anything else that was equally as hilarious. Not only did that code provide some undiscovered roots that proved that I was seeing the actual output of an OS command and not just what the LLM wanted me to see, but the real name of the developer was also in the source code, and I was able to learn more about him by looking on the internet for his LinkedIn and YouTube profiles. His LinkedIn referenced the website, so I knew that I had found the right person. But all I could find were grandiose claims about a master's degree in AI and a bunch of videos promoting AI businesses that used vague word salad to inspire idiots to buy whatever he was selling. Further, the code reeked of AI-generated content. The telltale signs of ridiculous over-commenting mixed with the obvious placeholder comments like "replace this with your custom filters" that you would never see in a complete codebase made by a solo dev made it very obvious what had happened. The report was sent to their email on the contact page over 6 months ago, with a follow-up from us a few weeks later. They responded to neither. And as far as I can tell, the website has been sold or abandoned. It has a new set of UI and endpoints, but the functionality is all locked behind memberships now, which are exorbitantly expensive. So whether they ever actually fix the vulns or them and their financially irresponsible user base are still in danger from granny bricks, we'll just have to wonder about that one. I hope this gives all of you who think AI coding is the future a wake-up call. Security review is an important part of the process, and current AI models simply cannot do this well. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe and leave us a like and comment so the algorithm grabs this video and runs with it. We're also looking for feedback on video ideas, so if you have something you'd like to see us do or learn more about, let us know. And finally, if you want to talk to me or anybody else in our group, come join our public Discord. And as always, till next time, stay vigilant.